Brian, how are you, man?
Doing great. How about you?
Great. Happy to have you here.
Thanks.
Happy Thursday, everyone.
We have some music in the background. Is it my music?
Maybe it's Brian's. I don't know who said
No,
it.
it's not.
It's gone.
It was my music. Sorry, you guys.
Can you turn it back on, Kathy?
Yeah.
Listen, I'm old and not computer savvy. You guys gotta excuse me.
I'm behind you.
At least I bring some fun and excitement to the table.
Yeah, I liked your music.
We'll wait 2 minutes and then I'll make a couple intros and we'll get cranking.
Josh, I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna grab water.
You got it. I see Austin. I don't see Howie yet.
Hey, Josh, I'm here. Yeah, I've got my video off.
Oh,
I'm
yeah,
just
yeah. Sorry,
driving.
I should notice the Yankees. I've become a sorry.
That's all right.
He's
I'm just driving
probably-
back from an appointment.
No
I'm
problem.
I might lose you in a minute, then I'll jump back on.
Yeah.
Did you get it, Howard?
Yeah.
Congrats. Way to go.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Otherwise, you know, Austin would get it.
How's the
I told-
master? Come on.
No, I told Austin the meeting's tomorrow, so I can get there. a little early. That's how we roll in Encino.
This is true. Hey, Howie, did you end up getting a corned beef sandwich from Uncle Bernie's yesterday?
I did not. I told my wife about it and I considered it, but we had some other food delivered that was quite tasty. So hope you
Somewhere
guys
out there-
enjoyed your.
Yeah, no, we did. And somewhere out there, a leprechaun is very sad that you didn't have any corned beef yesterday.
It's those Jewish leprechauns. They're calling me like 6, 7 times. Come on.
All right, we're gonna get started because we got a lot to cover, and I want to be mindful of everyone's time. So I just want to quickly, before we launch into this, and I'll frame it up. I want to introduce quickly my personal coach, Brian Martin. Brian is a MAPS coach, as you can see there. Brian's amazing. Has had a big impact, on my life and my growth and evolution, which basically indirectly impacts all of you guys, and is a MAPS coach for many top agents throughout the country, as well as several sort of office owners and leaders. And I've had the good fortune, again, to work with Brian. And I asked him to be on this call because he just always adds tremendous value, knows the right questions to ask. I think a lot of leadership is simply asking the right questions and listening and learning. And so, Brian's just here to be involved to whatever extent happens organically. But I wanted to, just acknowledge Brian and thank him for being on here. Brian, do you want to just say hello and just say maybe a word or two to whatever you want to introduce yourself as beyond mine?
I think you did a great job. I'm happy to be here. Thank you. Everyone that has their camera on right now, you're the most attractive people I've ever seen. And I love you a little bit more than people that don't have their camera on. I'm just going to be honest. But I appreciate you all being here, no matter how you showed up. And hopefully, it's, the conversation we have today is valuable.
Love it. Cool. And Brian lives in Austin, Texas, but spent quite a bit of time in Northern California in a very high-end luxury market. So he's very accustomed to a lot of the things that we deal with here, because as we know, real estate is always very local in certain respects. And obviously then there are broad principles that apply anywhere. So I think that's important to just understand that.
Yeah. So I grew up in Northern California. I lived around the LA area for about 10 years.
I forgot about that part. Yep.
So I lived in Long Beach for 4 years. I lived in kind of South Pasadena for a couple of years, and then I was getting my master's degree at Cal Arts. I lived in Valencia, and then moved to the small town of Austin, Texas, that a lot of people have never heard of before, and lived there for about 9 years. And then we traveled for about a year and a half full time. My family and I traveled full time, and relocated back to Northern California, kind of in the Silicon Valley, Los Gatos. So I worked with the Keller Williams offices there in Los Gatos and Carmel, and so very similar markets there to what you have. And then we moved back to Austin a year ago, and so here we are. Yeah,
Love it. Thanks, man.
yeah.
So I'm going to jump right in. So the purpose, this is going to be the first of what will be an ongoing monthly sort of series in our ALC, taking particularly relevant topics for our office and just masterminding around them, with ultimately always a goal to how do we do more business? Like, what strategies, what information can we provide to everyone here, regardless of your level of experience, to close more transactions and help more people achieve their goals, right? Our clients. So specific to this particular mastermind, we are talking about off-market sort of listings and off-market properties. And I know it's a very relevant topic. It's talked about all the time. What I'm learning is I've been learning and exploring this as I even prepare for this and I do my job. That means different things to different people, and there's several different angles to this. So we're not going to accomplish it all in 1 hour, but I want to at least get the conversation going and at least create some degree of information and value. So with that said, I want to start off with, like, what is an off-market listing, right? And why would someone not want to put it on the market? So I'm very basic, but I think it's important to. So Austin and Howie, I'm going to lean on you guys a bit because we spent a bit of time earlier today talking a little bit about this. But do you want to, or even Michael, do you want to just define what an off-market property is, and why would someone, want to list it off-market as opposed to on the market?
Well, it could be, sorry, I'm just going to jump in. I think it could be two things, probably more, but either you have a listing agreement signed by the seller or the owner, and they've requested you not put it on the MLS, CoStar, whatever you commercial guys use to list. So keeping it off of the listing services, or if it's just a property that you have a relationship with, the owner, and he's like, "Oh, find me a buyer," and those are the problem ones from my perspective, because there's nothing in writing, and agents want to get paid for their work. So it's a matter of trying to figure out how to secure your commission. So Austin, Howie?
Yeah, I think you summed it up perfectly, right? I mean, and maybe we're trying to put a little bit more clarity as to how you define each of these terms, right? Off market or pocket listing.
Which are interchangeable, basically, from what I understand.
Right. A lot of us use those terms interchangeably, right?
Yep.
As it pertains to the MLS guidelines, right? The clear cooperation guidelines in California, if you have a signed listing agreement and you do not put it on the MLS, yes, it is off the market, but you are in violation of that clear cooperation agreement. And Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, right?
If you publicly market it.
If you publicly market it, sorry.
Right. Yeah.
And so, don't forget that in the actual listing agreement, it also says that within 48 hours of execution that you need to go ahead and enter it into the MLS, right? For residential and for multifamily. So remember, the MLS is only as powerful as the number of listings that are on it. So if we continue to move listings off of it and put them in our pockets, then the MLS loses its effectiveness, right? So that's I would say the reason why this clear cooperation exists. Now, that's not to say that we don't still trade properties off market as well, right? Because that still happens. But you have to be careful about, getting yourself into trouble. If you start marketing it on social media and you haven't put it onto the MLS and you have a signed listing agreement, that would be a violation. That is what we're kind of trying to call it an off-market listing.
Right.
A pocket listing might be a situation like Michael had just said, where the owner, or you're cold calling or you're door knocking, and the owner says, "Bring me a buyer." I'm not signing anything, but if you bring me a buyer, I'm willing to pay you a commission, or I'm willing to sell. right? That is something that you have in your pocket. It's not real, right? Until you find that buyer, until you submit that offer with a cooperating broker agreement or single party compensation agreement, there is no money. And so you're at risk. So you have to tread light, you have to be careful.
And I'm hesitant to use the word listing if you don't have
Not a
anything
listing.
actually.
That's not it. So let me intervene for a second. So an off-market listing is where you have a listing agreement, a signed listing agreement, as opposed to what Austin is saying. You have a lead, which really is not an off-market property, and that in the clear cooperation agreement does not apply to that. The clear cooperation agreement applies to when you have a signed listing, you cannot publicly market that listing, right?
Exactly.
You can only, and we can get into this in a minute, you can only market it directly to individuals, basically, or people within a brokerage. And I'll let Michael, expand a little bit more on that. So again, an off-market listing is something that you have a listing agreement, and basically why one would want it off-market. Let's just talk about that for a second. Do you want to, Howie, you want to take the, why would someone want to have it, listed?
Sure, well,
Yeah, I mean, usually it's a matter of, I'd say the majority of times it's a matter of privacy, whether they're a celebrity, whether there's a divorce going on and they don't want a spouse or former spouse to know about assets. We've had situations where sellers have been concerned about stuff that is in their property may or may not be permitted, and they don't want somebody else to know about it and come in and, hey, you didn't do this, so therefore I'm gonna tell the city on you, that type of thing. So sellers just, they want us to, market it as widely as possible, but they don't give us the tools to do so by saying, keep it as a pocket. So the reasons why they would want it, there's a myriad of reasons. I think the majority of them is probably for privacy, for whatever reason they want it to be kept private. It almost doesn't matter, or the other version is what we got into a minute ago, which is I'm not giving you an agreement, but I want you to kind of work for free to find me a buyer. Therefore, you can't put it on the MLS. And I know that's another category that we'll talk about separately,
Get to that.
That's not technically a listing. But I think, in a legitimate situation, most sellers, it's privacy for some reason, for one degree or another, that type of thing.
Hey,
So
John.
while we're on this, and then we'll get into the, having a lead and what that looks like and strategies around that. But Michael, for a moment now, if you can just make sure we're all clear and keep it as simple as you can on what can you do with marketing a property that you have a listing for that's off market, that your client has asked you not to, publicly market it. What are you allowed to do? What are the constraints?
Well, simply it says, once you start doing any sort of public marketing, it's got to go on the MLS within 24 hours. So public marketing is putting a sign in the front yard, the for sale sign, putting it on your Facebook, Instagram, any sort of social media posting that is public, not private groups. So let's say you have internal, like an office group, like the Keller Williams Beverly Hills, that's a private group that's not out for the public. So that's okay. That's not considered public marketing. But once you start putting something out there, you have to put it within the MLS, and it's enforced by the actual MLSs. People come to me, does it violate? I say, ask the MLS if it violates, if you're trying to, skirt the issue, because they're the ones who are going to make the decision. Obviously, there are things that are clear. Sending mass emails out, a no-no, but one-to-one emails, calling members of the public up individually is fine. You just can't mass market something.
So if you have an email, if you have your own, email distribution list, your database, you can obviously email it to them, correct?
It says no mass emails. So.
But what if it's a private group?
Yeah, no, look, again, I don't make the rules.
Right.
I don't think that it would violate it, but what defines mass emails?
We haven't got a fine yet on that area, but we have got one fine in our office that we know of so far?
Well, we've gotten by warning by the first from the MLS is you have to take a class, a violation, you've been warned, take a class. The second is when they start imposing money, fees.
So
But I don't think.
can I ask a question? When you say a closed group, like a Facebook group, that we can market it to that closed group, doesn't that closed group though still need to be under the same brokerage?
Well,
Or
no,
is
I'm just
that-
saying, let's say you have a temple group. I don't know, maybe that is a private group, or, if your Boy Scouts group, that's not a public group.
So then
So-
that's how TAN and the PLS are getting around it,
Probably.
Yeah,
basically.
yes, exactly.
But we also have Jessica Russell on the call. Not to blast you out, Jessica, but she runs a great site, a Facebook page or group called Pocket Listings Off Market Properties, Plump. Jessica, if you're around, do you have any light to shed on this? You're on mute if you can hear us.
Greg, I didn't realize she was on. Thanks for pointing that out. I do know
Yeah.
Jeff, and of course what she's doing. So
Anyway, there's a third area that we didn't cover on pocket listings, which
Go ahead,
makes a pocket listing. That's simply someone that may be 2 or 3 weeks away. They're painting, they're doing something, or they're doing a minor remodel, and you're trying to get a listing and you have no reason to get them to sign. But again, if you get them to sign something and say, I can pre-market it privately, that's a way to get a listing closed where someone is hesitant and doesn't see that you could basically start pre-marketing it.
So we talked about that.
This is probably the biggest use of a pocket listing. It's the obvious, every big team uses this conversation to close buyers, to get buyers to work with. This is huge. There are these ones that, yes, they're a celebrity and they don't want to be in the market or divorcing. I've ran into all of those. But the one that's used the most is this one that gets someone to bring their listing on the market, or at least to sign something with you while they're still doing their painting. So you can do some pre-marketing, legal in this current environment, legal pre-marketing, which we can use our offices, inner office and in multi-office website as a tool to do just that, which we've started doing. And this is where some competitors are using this to the max. If they take a listing, they're throwing it up very quickly on this inner company website like that we're doing now to take advantage of it so agents within our own office can double end it. And
So
the
Robert, do you want to
company-
take a step back for 1 second and just go in particularly slow on exactly from start to finish what you're speaking of? Because, Austin and Howie and I spoke about this morning and talked about the same thing, and it's a great opportunity. So start
It's
over
the
again.
strategy.
Sign the listing. Go ahead.
A lot of times we go into listing appointments and someone says, I'm not ready yet. It's usually, if they say they like you, I'm going to go with Austin. 9 times out of 10, they will not. If they say, hey, I'm going to go with you, Austin, don't worry about it. 9 times out of 10, that means they're not going to go with you. So you got to overcome the objection, get them to sign something on the spot. So if you say, hey, look, we have a system while you're painting your house that we can pre-market it. We can even a high chance of getting it sold before it hits the MLS. Then a lot of times they'll go ahead and move forward with you. So you're overcoming an objection, but also you're overcoming their best friend who they're thinking about. Really, that's the true objection, going with them. So if you can get it signed now, you have a much better chance of getting the listing.
So wait, I was talking about a little, Howie, do you want to talk about what you and I spoke about this morning?
I'm a little confused now because I think, Robert, you're talking about getting the listing, but you're still not clarifying
Right.
why or how somebody can market it. Let's say, hold on, Robert, let's say you're the seller. You sign an agreement with me today, okay? But you're painting, you're staging, you're redoing the house. So we know that we need 2 weeks before we actually hit the market, okay? Yes, I can use the 2 weeks of getting the house ready to market the home, but certain things have to happen. Either it needs to be put on the MLS as a coming soon. And
The company, the company intranet, our company's intranet, our system of pocket listings, it can be put there.
Right, so that's a second option. That's a second option.
No, well,
Yeah,
it should be put there. Now, every agent has their own database, they have their own buyers, and the big teams will just almost double end it automatically. It just happens.
Right. But Robert, what we're trying to identify,
a single agent on a small team or no team can use this same listing tool and say, look, I can pre-do it. I can do this. And where I go a little bit deeper, and this is a longer conversation, I say, look, let me get some guinea pigs in and show people who can look past a little bit of dust, and only those people. And if we need to change something and they're all repeating the same thing to us and we both miss this, then we can change it before it hits the mass market. Also, a lot of times those buyers feel like they're getting backstage passes and they'll make a decision on the spot, and usually it will sell at a very good price or even higher. Houses I've pre-sold that were record high prices, I always wondered, if I hit the MLS, would it have gone as high? Would it have been a record?
Austin,
Can
go
I come
ahead.
in for a second? Yeah, can I just, so I want to give just a real life example, which is literally happening to us right now. We called this guy, expired listing off market. He wasn't ready, right? He had some water damage, he was fixing it. We talked about the $6 million house. He was fixing the water damage. He wasn't ready. I said, look, let me just float it around, our clients in-house to see what we can find. I knew we had a guy who was looking for that kind of property. We brought him in, made an offer in escrow, about to close in 2 weeks. And not only that, but we also got the guy who's buying the property, we also got his listing to sell because he has to sell the other house. So
Merce, here's a question for you. For the house that you sold, right, did you already have the listing agreement signed?
No.
No, I did not. No,
So you were pre-marketing it. You were pre-marketing. You didn't have a listing agreement signed, and you just played matchmaker, right?
Well, they already had the buyer.
I knew when I saw the house, I spoke to the seller, I knew that we had somebody who's looking for that,
right, absolutely.
That price range, right?
So that's great brokerage, right? You met two people and you put them together. That's great brokerage. And I think what we're trying to figure out here, guys, is so the assumption is you have the listing signed already. And it's this 2-week period, 10-day period, whatever, before it hits the market because you need to finish staging or photography, or you want to pre-market it. It could be any of those reasons. So what Howie, the path that Howie was going down is, how do you actually pre-market? What do you need to do for that 10-day to 14-day period, right? So one of them is to put it in the coming soon section of the MLS. The other way is what Robert had mentioned, right? Where we put it onto the internal Facebook page or spreadsheet or the KW Shares Facebook page. Another option could be to sign the SELM, right? That's another form that we have at our disposal, which, oh, by the way, and Michael can confirm this, if you have it signed, you can't just keep it in your file. You need to submit it to the MLS once you have it signed. And then a fourth option that we kind of talked about earlier, Josh, Howie, and I, was that if you signed the listing agreement, but did not have the listing start until 10 to 14 days after it was signed.
And that's risky, guys. That's risky. I would never do that because Austin's going to come over, sell it. He's clever enough. He's going to say, hey, you got a listing signed? When does it start? That's the insightful question. Yep. Oh, it starts in 10 days. Right. Oh, well, I can bring you a buyer. You don't even have to worry about that other agent. Be careful on that. If you know you're in a competitive situation, I would not put a long delay time.
There are risks.
The point is, you're not protected.
Don't do that.
Right. There are risks and pros and cons of each of those 4 options. And there could be more options. These are the only 4 that we actually just discussed this morning. But there are risks and pros and cons of each of those options, guys, right? So
the purpose of this is to give you guys information so you can weigh out the pros and cons, because each situation is unique, right? But the more you understand your options, the more you're going to be able to effectively navigate and get deals done. Go ahead, Austin.
We did, just quickly, we went into an appointment and we asked those deep questions. There was a signed listing starting, it was like 2 or 3 weeks later. We actually brought a buyer, put it into escrow, and the other one was voided. And they were good with that.
Michael, quick question. So it really, as far as the marketing of an off market goes, it really what it boils down to is how you define mass marketing. How is that being defined?
Well, that's where we all need to be creative. So
Right.
as I said, there's certain things that they've made it simple that you can't do. You can't, post it on your Facebook, social, your public pages. You can't send out the mass emails is
A little
debatable.
ambiguous.
It's a
quite
gray
frankly.
area. It's a gray
Yeah.
area, isn't it? Yeah.
We've gotten, warnings from the MLS to agents, you've sent out a mass email of this off-market property in violation of clear cooperation. So and then, they need to speak with then compliance at the MLS to find out what exactly, or how it violated. Because the argument is, no, how do you know if it was a mass?
Hey, Michael, can I ask a stupid question? If it has to go on the MLS in 24 hours, can you send out a mass email in that first 24 hours?
Well, yeah, so, there's.
So you can still do it within that time frame.
Yeah, as long as it goes on the MLS within 24 hours.
So
Look,
we
there's
just
tricks to
have to
also.
get a lot more efficient.
I think also the coming soon, though, as Howie was saying, that's putting it in the MLS. So you're not, if you have a client seller that wants it off market, that's
Right,
not.
that defeats the purpose, right?
That doesn't
Correct.
achieve.
Correct. I was just bringing that up in terms of that allows you to market it as an off market for the period of time before it goes active officially on the MLS.
Now,
Okay,
Coming
the problem
soon.
is, though, you don't have
here's a
pictures.
technical question.
No, yes, you can, Michael. I
No,
did.
no. But usually there's the lag time where it's not going on because you're using it to, have the house staged, clean, so.
Right,
But
but that's
I
not
think
always the case. The one time I did it coming soon, I had all my pictures, and
Yeah.
You're right. Most people have one picture, which is kind of frustrating because it doesn't give us the ability to show buyers. The one time I used it, I did put all my pictures up because I had them. The timing worked out, but that allows you to market it as off market as possible without getting in trouble because you've established that it is coming soon on the MLS. I think the bigger point that we need to go back to is if you have a listing agreement, you cannot market it off market without going through the proper channels to cover yourself.
Right. So we're here to figure out ways to, not violate the clear cooperation policy. I think that's the purpose of this call. So a little bit. Let me just say one thing. Brian Katz came to me with a question earlier.
I didn't
Hold on, guys. Kat,
Mute yourself, Kathy.
she's good. Go ahead,
She's
Michael.
There was a question about he had a knows of a seller that listed a property and the listing didn't, the listing agreement was signed, let's say today. The listing period was not going to begin for another 2 weeks. And they said there was a Redfin agent that brought an offer before the listing agreement listing period started. So I would say that the listing agent that signed it is shit out of luck, basically, because he doesn't have, it's brought to that. So, this was a good place to get your question answered.
That's the risk that Robert E was talking about, right?
If the seller didn't quite understand that technicality and you're close friends and you got them to sign something quickly, you could save yourself, but they hire a lawyer or they hate you at the end of the escrow, they're not going to pay you.
Right.
So you need to spin and pivot quickly if that ever happens to anyone on this
Well,
call.
and look, here's a solution to that though, right? So if you have predated the listing or post-dated the listing, I should say, if you did in fact find that buyer and you wanted to double end it, when you submit that offer, if you submit it with a single party compensation agreement, then you would, and they sign off on it, then you would be protected. So that is a way around that. So there are risks and pros and cons to each of these options, and there are workarounds for each of those.
I think the easiest way to avoid any of the risk is just make the listing agreement start that day and make sure that you get the SELM document into the MLS. And
That's
Austin-
my question. Like, what's the downside of that? Is
That's
there
exactly
any
what I was
con
thinking.
about
Go
that?
ahead.
Well,
The
let's say
downside, the
someone said,
downside, as
"I have
Austin pointed out, sorry, Robert, the downside, as Austin pointed out, is that myself included, I always forget to send it to the MLS. So technically I'm in violation. I do have it in my file if they call and it was dated properly. You just have to remember that, oh, this document has to be sent to the MLS. End of story. That's it. But then you're protected if let's say, the listing agreement starts and it's supposed to go to the MLS in 2 weeks, your agreement with the seller. Let's say someone gets sick in the seller's house and they need another 3 weeks. You're fine. You're covered as long as you've, protected yourself. So I think the SELM document, from my perspective, is the biggest way to cover our ass and not get screwed by.
Yeah, quite honestly, that is following the rule to a T, right?
That's what I generally do. I get that signed, get it all signed at the time. I don't always send it to the MLS. I'll remember that, but that's my way out of all of this.
Right.
So one of the things you didn't hear from me that I may have done before I became broker was,
This is being recorded, Michael.
It actually is.
Rosales with the Z.
It's just bending the rules. So you sign a listing agreement, you have it start the day you sign it, the listing period. You do the SELM, so it's not, you pick a date, put it on the
Michael,
listing.
can you stop for 1 second? Can you just explain for some people that may what the SELM is and the parameters around
Seller,
it? Would be very helpful.
So as Austin mentioned in the beginning, when you sign a listing agreement, it's supposed to go into the MLS within a certain amount of time. Every MLS has different. Ours, I believe it's 48 hours after signing. It's supposed to get entered into the MLS. If you're going to keep it off for whatever reason, so you're going to
Stage the
take
property, do some painting,
stage,
whatever.
stage painting, whatever. Then it's the SELM, seller exclusion from the multiple listing. So it's basically, it's an authorization from the seller that they know that you're keeping it off of the MLS for a certain amount of time. And as Austin said, who read the MLS rules and procedures very well, you have to submit that form to the MLS. What I like to do is sign a listing agreement.
1 second, because this is important. And that you can have, it can be any amount of time, right? As long as the seller agrees. It could be a week, it could be 3 months.
Indefinitely
Correct.
throughout the time of the listing. So you can keep that off.
Yeah.
And, so you're keeping it, so that form is just a permission by the seller to keep it out of the MLS. Basically. Think of it as that. And when you're going through your listing agreement, there's a box that you check if you're going to keep it, if you're not listing it immediately, and it automatically populates that form into the in zip forms. So it will prompt you to fill it out if you say that you're not going to be putting it in MLS within the certain
And so
amount of
when
time.
if you sign this listing, you have the SELM, signed as well, you've submitted it to the MLS, it's for 3 weeks. What does that allow you to do?
Okay, so the broker's, the listing agent's next best friend is the modification of listing. So I use that all the time to modify my listing agreement. So let's say you have a listing agreement that starts immediately. When you upload something to the MLS, you have to put your listing agreement start date, which could have been 2 weeks ago, which would make it seem like it's been on the market for 2 weeks already. So if you do a modification of listing, you could change your list start date to the day that you're putting it in the MLS. So everything just starts at 0 when you upload it. Does that make sense to people?
It's exciting. And it's exciting to the public too. And
yeah, you see 0 days on the market, just listed.
Now, on the other hand,
that means you have to modify the listing agreement, right?
Yeah.
To make it concurrent with the expiration of the SELM.
Now,
Exactly.
here's something for any new agent. If you're not doing that and you say, geez, my listing started 5 days ago, and you key it that it started 5 days ago, you're going to get a fine because you should have done it 5 days ago, or at least 3 days ago, or 4 days ago.
That's
So
a
And
good
Josh,
point.
to answer your
not
question, Josh,
understanding this.
what a signed and submitted SELM does for the agent, the listing agent, is it allows you to not have it in the MLS and then be able to market it on social media and mass marketing without being in violation of clear cooperation,
That's
don't-
okay.
right?
No.
Because you have a signed
Wait,
listing
Can you
agreement.
repeat that? Can you
You
repeat
have a
that?
signed listing
No,
agreement.
I don't think
No,
that's correct.
That's,
I don't
No,
think
that's not correct.
Not?
Austin.
That's not
No.
correct.
No, unless, no.
If you have a signed listing
can
agreement, but you're
privately market
forbidden to put
Well,
it on
one
MLS
person at
for
a
the
time.
client.
Austin, go ahead. Sorry, start over.
Right.
Everybody else.
If you have a signed listing agreement and you have submitted an SALM because the seller has forbidden you from putting it on the MLS, right? It's signed, but you're not allowed to put it on there. Why couldn't you then go ahead and market it?
That's the
whole-
clear
that's the
cooperation.
whole
That's the
point.
whole gist of the clear
Okay.
cooperation
Fair enough.
agreement.
Good.
You can't do
This is like we're trying to hash it
That's
out. Like
why
that's
we're doing
perfect.
this. Austin's probably
Yeah.
one of the most knowledgeable people I know. And
No, that's perfect.
Um,
No, no,
So
I mean, that's it. You can't put it, even with the SELM, you can't do any public marketing. You could, it's your list, you have a listing agreement, you could market it, but not publicly. That's the key. No
So-
public marketing.
Josh,
And I think
here's a question. Why don't we, but under forward living, I don't know how many agents are there under forward living. but
3,300.
Technically, you could, how many?
3,300.
Okay, 3,300. Technically, we could have a Facebook group that's a closed Facebook group and market it there.
We
Wouldn't
do.
that work?
We do. And
I'm
that's
not-
what we're
I'm
here
not
to
part
talk
of it.
about.
We live in
We
it.
need that. It's new. It's new, Merce.
It's not
Oh,
that
not
new.
in it.
It's not that new, but
Hello.
obviously we're not doing a great job at.
Hello.
Yeah, Jessica, give us
Hello.
1 second, and then we'll let you. And Alfredo, are you on?
Welcome to my life that nobody knows about things that we've been marketing and advertising for.
We're saying for everybody else, the Facebook group that we have for Forward Living is called Forward Living Shares.
Can you put in the chat box, Austin?
Let me see.
Yeah, I'll look it up.
right now.
All right. So, Jessica, go ahead. I know we were asking.
Okay, that's okay. And I apologize. I've been trying to get from the valley over Mulholland, so I couldn't talk to anyone. All right, so as you guys know, and I'm not pitching my group, I have about 30,000 agents in the 12 groups that are the pocket listings and off-market properties. I started that 7 years ago online. I have the Plump Agent Services, which is a paid service for pockets off-market, coming soons, foreclosures, and all of that stuff. Now, here's what's going on, because I've been watching this from the beginning, and I also teach how to do off-market transactions. So regardless of what anybody is saying, and I know Robert is fighting for this like crazy, but pockets and off markets are right now being restricted because of NAR. As we know, they're in bed right now for whatever reason with the MLS. Now, MLS, for whatever reason, and I know some of it because I've been around for a long time, is now gaining a lot of authority over the agents. The brokerages have signed agreements with MLS. And now here's where the problem comes in, because the MLS, and watch the MLS over the next couple of years, because, and I'm saying this realistically, they're being broken down all across the United States, definitely in California. So a lot of people are regressing against them. However, now with the pocket listings, what is happening is that there are no real big pocket listing police out there. They're trying not to find people, but they started to find people on a limited basis here and there. Technically, they don't want you to market it in any manner unless you market it through the MLS. That includes the coming soon, because they have totally lost most of their market share. I spoke a couple years ago, and yes, that was a couple years ago, with a lawyer over at NAR about this. And the way that they put it is, now there's a big separate divide, because homeowners, of course, and people out in the public don't understand what's happening here with the MLS. So if it leaks into the public with the home ownership, I guarantee you that most of this is not going to really be able to hold up legally. So right now it's an internal thing within the industry between the brokerages, real estate agents who have the licenses with the brokerages, and the MLS. So it's a power play. So if you give the authority to the MLS is going to, really try to step down hard and impose on it. The greener someone is, the more they're going to believe. And right now, because a lot of people in this business as salespeople don't really get involved in legalities and understand what things mean, there's a lot of confusion. So if you are in commercial real estate, obviously you've been doing this kind of transaction for decades. This started about 5 years ago, 7 years ago, to kind of come into the mainstream with residential. One of the questions that you guys had a problem with earlier was, if you're going to do a transaction and you want to do an off-market transaction, what a lot of brokerages are doing, and I speak to a few of the, not owners, but the managers throughout Southern California, definitely around the Beverly Hills area, West Side, is that if you're going to do an off-market transaction, you can do something very easy for the client if they want to do the legwork off market and not on MLS. And I'm just saying this because this is not what MLS wants you to do, or really is saying they're allowing. You can do it off the MLS. And when it's time to get closer to putting the property into escrow, obviously you put it into MLS and then you put it into escrow. But if you, yes, you can go ahead and you can do the SEL documentation, but then you start playing around with time. And we've always had a problem with this with the MLS because they don't want to, play with time on market and all of this. Now, when it comes to public groups and everything, what they are saying, and there's been some lawsuits, and right now you're going to see more lawsuits kind of fight it out between the brokerages, whether or not it's their personal portal or if it's some of their online programs. And I heard, the PLMS, which is honestly, they're trying to become the next MLS. So it's not really about pockets anymore. I've been watching them for years, and that started after I started. And then also you have 10. And so these are people that are getting very aggressive with trying to fight down NAR and MLS. And behind MLS obviously is clear, and that's all around the United States. But what's happening also, just to note, is that this is creating a lot of problems within the industry, and there's a big shakeup with the executive levels, with the clear all across the United States. So this situation is big because you have about between 35 to 45% of all properties that are being transacted right now off of the market, non-MLS. And so the agents have competition because now they're also dealing with the investors and the flippers, which obviously they don't have to have their license, and they can just throw the property in, which was done traditionally before all of this started, with an escrow company or through a lawyer, and close out the transaction. So the rules are still being developed right now. And right now, the MLS, from where I'm standing, is kind of playing around a little bit to see what they can get away with. But there's some fire that's beginning to start because it's leaking out of the industry into the home ownership. And this is not a legal law that has been implemented in our county, our state, or around the United States. This is something that is an internal regulation. And so things are starting to change. So when it comes to transacting, and then I'll stop whenever you guys want me to, but when it comes to transacting, the safest, so to speak, if you have any kind of concerns, is to work with your client, get them to put the position in there of either, now pocket listing is basically of something and you're circulating information about it, and yes, you don't have it in writing. An off market is you have some kind of written commitment, or I'll even stretch it, but you are the verified representative, and only you, to represent that property, even though we're saying it's off market with the seller. So it doesn't belong to, the person that you're working for, or if you're part of a team, belongs to the team leader and so forth. It's yours, and you should have something in writing Now, what that means could be something different because your brokerage obviously would want you to have one of the legal documents that we use, but it could be on a napkin. But then again, that may not be the correct way according to your broker or your team leader in your office. Now, the issue is, and I'll say it so nobody else has to say it, a good portion of the properties that are being closed in all of the real estate companies are off-market properties. They're not properties that were thrown onto the MLS. So that's the dilemma. How do you actually do this type of transaction to bring it into the company in order for the company to effectively and legally close it without having problems now with the MLS or NAR? Where I'm standing, because I have the same situation, I have the program and then I have the groups that started, and I told Rob, and I take credit for it, I started all this crap because it got really popular. All the agents started to get involved with the off markets, with the Facebook and social media online. I killed myself for years and I developed a monster that everybody loves. And so now I have to also watch and figure out how to navigate some of these rule changes. Now, for whatever reason, because the truth of the matter is the MLS is really, and I say this truthfully, not because I don't like them, but they are holding on for dear life because they have Zillow and they have realtor.com who's buying every square corners of company to push them out. And this is really what they're doing right now to try to save their marketplace because of the fact that the percentages of closing transactions are so high. So logically speaking, I would say, if you're talking about pocket listings and off-market properties that were, let's just say, in the 10 to maybe 20% level of being transacted off market without utilizing the MLS, I can say, yeah, the industry can turn back. But you're talking about 40-ish% of all transactions. Now, I've had my license for about 25-ish years. I don't even know. Some of you who know me for years, I've been in different capacities. You knew my mom, and I can go on and on. So I grew up doing old school off market transactions because of joint ventures, developments, opportunities, and commercial property. And so now we have this transition that is so embedded into the way that we work with residential real estate. How do you turn back? You cannot. So here's the problem. You have the brokerages that are kind of waiting around to see what happens. But because of the fact that inventory has decreased every year for God knows how many years, but the properties that are available are being sold now off market as a pocket. And then also, you know, like, for example, like some states say whisper properties, like in New York, they've implemented some really strong rules. It's virtually totally illegal. How do you go back? How do you change this? So I think, you know, to be understanding of how you can market, and I'll just kind of touch off with this because I didn't mean to monopolize the whole meeting, but to do what you're doing, there is a risk factor here. But when you have a few million licensed agents, that doesn't mean working agents, but licensed agents in California alone, how are they going to crack down on this? So then they go to groups like, you know, what I have in 10, and they go to the PLS. Now, the PLS has some power behind it, as we think, because the guys that are involved with that, you know, with Mauricio and everything, are all on television and this and that. So it looks fine and cool and everything. But the realistic part of it is it's a business. And so people are looking for other opportunities more than ever just to reach and get in you know, touch with newer people to sell their properties and to offer more to their clients. So where I stand as someone who has a business like this, I know that if I'm representing the person who is purchasing into the service, and I'm not talking about the Facebook group, but the one who's purchasing into a service, technically they're saying that that's called a private group and you're excluding everyone. But then I'm not, because see, how I get away with it is I'm a marketing company for real estate agents. So when you're using, Property Blast, or you're using, a membership type of a group, they don't want that to happen, but they can't really squeeze people like that out, because then what they're basically trying to do is they're trying to say, realtor.com, Zillow, you can't do that. And so when it comes to fighting against them, it's a problem. And if you guys have gone back, and I know some of you are on the call that have been back way with me when, across the United States, the MLS was not arm in arm. It was like one region to another, maybe another, it skips and so forth. We used to go to West LA, and that was our MLS, and they were stolen separate. So, this is what has happened when they started to do social media and get involved with, putting our properties online and feeding RSS feeds to everybody. Then they started selling us out and selling just the industry for themselves, and they can't get that control. So a lot of the things that they're saying, you should be a little aware and cautious, and you have to make your decision. And if you're working for a broker, or you're working for a brokerage that does not want you to be involved with this, and you're working for them, then you have to make your choice, or you have to do what they're asking of you. But the truth of the matter is, it's a power play right now. There's really huge brokerages that are national that are fighting against this because it leads to bigger things, and they're being broken down right now. So we have limited paperwork. We have for doing a transaction. We have protocol that we can use that will not make it illegal. According to MLS is saying that when you do off-market transactions and pocket listings, you're doing immoral and you're going against ethics. They say that because that's what they want to believe. Sure, there's people that don't understand how to transact off-market.
So first of all, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And it is part of a much bigger picture, which was not necessarily my intention, but I do think it adds some good color and perspective that I think you help provide. So thank you a lot for that.
You're welcome.
So then just getting back focused, what does this mean for us today? Right. And how do we walk away from this call, being more purposeful, being better informed, and helping us live bigger lives and do more business. So hold on, Robert, 1 second. I wanted to just give Brian, since he's been on here for an hour and he's breaking up his vacation to be on here, by the way, maybe a little chance to just weigh in and give us your perspective, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of information, right? And it's not, if you kind of hear all this stuff and you go, oh, it's crazy, or there's a lot to deal with or whatever, or if you turn away from this, that's a conscious decision to turn away business, right? So what I would say is, what opportunity do we have in figuring this out, right? I heard a couple of the reasons why people would do this. I think we have another one right now, which is if you think of the typical story that somebody goes through when listing their house, right? What does that sound like? Are there a lot of showings? Are there multiple offers? Are there is that what sellers experience in your market?
Yes.
Is that the only way to sell a home?
No.
Does every seller want that? You know what I mean? So part of the thought is if every seller doesn't want that, then we can also think about what are the other options or the ways, and that's what I've heard many of you talk about is different ways you could use this and say, here's actually a value proposition of how we sell your home, right? Or maybe this is a way that might be better for you, but you don't want 200 people to walk through your house, in the next 2 weeks. Okay, great. Let's do it a different way. If there's an advantage there, if there's a marketing advantage for you, you owe it to yourself to figure this out. Because frankly, what I've heard just in kind of observing here is we're all kind of sitting there going well, I think it kind of means this, or I think it kind of means, and I know it's not clear, right? And this is your business, right? This is your business. This is your opportunity. So when you figure out, okay, this is the way that I can move forward, and I feel comfortable with, being able to do this without getting a bunch of fines or getting in trouble with the MLS or something. When you figure out that for your business, you're able to go and find the opportunity that others aren't finding, right? So I think the first thing you have to figure out is that it's a question to ask yourself is like, how am I educating myself that's actually helping set up my business in the future? Whether it's this or anything else, right? There's something that you're doing today, kind of, it might be behind the scenes or it might be something that only you're aware of right now, that you educate yourself, that's going to actually help prepare your business for where you're going in the future. So based on this conversation, there's opportunity because I haven't heard anybody clearly state like, here's how you go do it.
Exactly.
So that means a lot of agents in your market are not going to do it. Right? I mean, because it's not that clear. It's not step 1, step 2, step 3. So figure out what that is for you. Do the homework, read all the documents, read like Jessica went through a ton of stuff, and she's obviously educated in like what all the stuff that's going on in the background. Figure out like what that means for you in your local market. Go educate yourself, come up with your plan. It's okay, these are the 5 steps for me. And then I can go to a seller and say, look, you don't have to be like everybody else. You don't have to go through the craziness. Let's sell this house. Let's get a great price for you. And let's do it on your terms. How many other people are going to sit there and tell them that? Right?
Yeah.
I mean, most real estate agents are just going to tell a story. Like one of the questions I had here for you guys, like, what is the story of your market? Right? What's the story of your market that's going on right now? And after you
red
answer
hot.
that,
It's
if
red hot.
you go ahead, Robert.
It's red hot. Our market's red hot. We don't know about tomorrow, but right now it's at record highs still.
Okay. So that's a story, right? And so the question is like, does that story serve you? When you have that conversation with a buyer or with a seller, does that actually help you, to help them to move forward? Like I'll tell you this, right? Like in my market, I'll give you an example. In my market, it's super low inventory, right? I coach people all over the nation. I don't coach, there's not one single market that wouldn't tell me they have super low inventory right now, right? My local market went up 43% in a year.
Incredible.
That's the average sales price, right?
You should have called me to buy there.
So I play a game where I go, do you think your neighbors know how much their house is worth? And some of you are shaking your head no, right? Like, so think about your area, right? So if you live in an area where there's 7 numbers in a sales price, right? You have a second comma, right? It's over $1 million. Okay, great. Do they know what the second number is? Most places don't, right? Like, or in markets where the average sales price is under $1 million, it's like, do they know what the first number is? Like in hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you offered them $1,000, if they knew that number or not, do they know the number? My neighbors don't.
Many don't. Yep.
I think in a lot of places they don't. And we're talking about $100,000 off at least, if they don't know that number. So oftentimes when I'm speaking with agents, right, we go to like, these are the objections we're seeing, or these are the problems we're having, or this is the challenging part of the market. Our number one job is to educate people. Because if they don't even know that, I mean, how many objections would you have if they realized their house was worth more than they thought it was? Could you work through some of them?
Yep.
I don't know. Those are a couple of my thoughts. And it's just in respect to y'all's time, I want to share some of that. I think these are the questions to ask though. What's the story of your market? Does it serve you? Is there a way that you see the business moving in the future, and a way that you educate yourself today to help you take advantage of that, really in an unfair proportion? Because the market is, some say the market has shifted. It either has shifted or is shifting currently. Most of the agents you come across every day probably don't think that. And they're living in the market of yesterday. So if you can identify something like this, where it's, okay, I see people that I can market, I can do things off market, go and learn about it. Be the person that crushes that. If that's not the interest of you, that's fine too. Just identify what is your ideal client, because in shifting markets, people transfer from being kind of like the generalist. Like they'll work with anybody who wants to buy and sell anything in real estate. The people that get specific have substantially more business in any shifting market. So the other question to be asking yourself is like, if you were to get specific about your business, who is your ideal client? What's the ideal product? Because you could just be the specialist of that, right? If you had the database of all the people that want to, sell in a certain neighborhood or area, or people that want to buy there, you don't really have to do a lot of stuff on the MLS. You could play matchmaker. You just need more people.
Yep. Great perspective. Thank you.
Yeah.
Who else? We'll give it another 5 or 10 minutes for any, assuming we like questions, comments. There's obviously a lot to unpack here. I didn't know exactly. My goal, again, as I said at the beginning, was just to create more dialogue, more information, more communication, and get us all, to Brian's point, thinking about what is your unique value proposition and what are you doing to execute on that every day, right? And how informed are you proactively to make that happen?
Can
Brian,
I ask?
go ahead, Brian Pincus.
Thank you. So I think just what I'm taking away right now is that I'm going to try and I will get my listing agreement signed the day, like as of today, and then get the SELM signed as well, submit it to the MLS. And then it sounds like, of course, I'll market it on Facebook to our closed groups. It sounds like it, tell me if I'm wrong, KW alerts is probably allowed, I'm guessing, even though they may not want that. It's not really public, it's just agents. Am I right? Anyone having a comment about that?
I would say it's not allowed. KW
Not allowed. Okay. All right. I haven't been doing that, but now I'm going to keep not doing it. All right, cool.
I think it's an ongoing conversation to figure out how we could manipulate the clear cooperation policy to our best advantage. And when we have a listing that we want it off market for a week, 2 weeks, the entire length of the listing, how we could effectively market it, without triggering the clear cooperation policy and violating that. And the tools that we have, the private Facebook the Beverly Hills group that we have internally, the Forward Living one that's started as well. I don't know. I mean, we have agents that have joined us from other companies. Is there anyone willing to speak up to see how like other brokerages are handling clear cooperation? I mean, I think
I could touch on that a little bit, man. I mean, I've seen a lot of people put their because the clear cooperation policy actually says within 1 business day. So I've seen people start their marketing on Friday just to buy like 2 days so they can have a pre-marketing for 2 days. When I was at Compass, they started doing coming soon a couple years ago, and then also they would do exactly what we're doing, market it within as soon as they get it coming soon at Compass, like all the managers and stuff, they tell you, put it on coming soon and market it to all the agents within, the company. So I think they're doing similar things, but the one thing that I wanted to ask people about is putting it on Friday. Is anybody doing that?
Well, that's
that's a PLS, isn't that their thing?
Yeah, that's Mauricio's premise. Putting it on on a Friday, and you have 2 days to basically get buyers. This also goes to a bigger picture of how Zillow is, taking our listings and sort of hiding our information with it. So I think that's like a big picture why, agents are wanting to keep things off market, because when stuff gets syndicated, we lose control over the listings. So that's another just conversation that we're all having.
Obviously, guys, we're not going to conquer the world and solve its problems today, but at least we're having the dialogue and we'll continue it. Howie, you were going to say something.
Yeah, just to build on what Kevin said, I think the thing that is at our fingertips that we can all take advantage of is when we have an off-market listing or whatever we're calling it, a pocket listing, to market it within our brokerage, to market the crap out of it inside Keller Williams Beverly Hills, to market the crap out of it inside the Forward Living group, because that's 3,500 agents thereabouts. And that's what Compass is doing. And that's how that's a fraction of where they're finding their success. So we should really focus on that as a starting point, I think.
And Howie, spot on. And I for a minute lost sight of like, guys, let me say this. So I am passionate about collaboration, and because I fully believe that like we do a lot more together when we're interacting and sharing and communicating, and that's something I think that really differentiates our office. And I'd like to believe that like there's real value in that, and this is case in point. So I think if we can, even just our own office, right, because we have far more control here, of really starting to use even that internal Facebook and figure out ways that we can enhance that communication. We started to have a little bit of a spreadsheet on the KWBH virtual. I think there's dramatic room for improvement there, by the way, and we're going to work on that. I actually had a conversation with Justin. I know Kathy's shared with me a lot of thoughts with the ALC on that. I think there's a lot more opportunity just within 520 agents right here. Because look, part of it is the number of people. Definitely there's power in the numbers, but it's also the depth of the power of the relationships within that group, right? So we have much more control over the depth of our relationships within 520 agents. So let's start there. And we can also expand that again into our sister company being 3,400. It's actually 3,449, I think it's the last number I saw. So I think spending some time, I'm working again with the ALC on how we can enhance that. But at the very least, guys, let's all make it a conscientious point to visit our internal Facebook page more often, right? And start to communicate. I try to be, people ask questions all the time on that. I just, I hate when it falls on deaf ears. It doesn't happen too often, but once in a while I'll see someone post something and I feel like no one's, and that sends a signal that we're not as collaborative as we ultimately could be. So if we all make a more conscious decision to interact more with one another, that I think that will already go a long way.
So maybe at every Zoom meeting, we constantly put out the off-market websites that we're using so that if agents are going into it looking for properties or listing agents are dropping their properties in there, it makes it more powerful. So just using it and to keep repeating it and letting people reminding it's there. So the obvious thing from a buyer's point of view, agent working with a buyer to get a buyer to work with you, is that you have pockets. That makes every agent a powerful, unique proposition to that buyer, where the buyer wants to work with you. So that's the obvious story. The other less obvious story is the story of that seller who is working on their house, or there's a temporary delay where you can go ahead and list it, minimize their traffic because you're bringing a higher quality of buyers through. So that's a little bit more creative on the listing side, but it can be used on both sides very strongly as a strong tool to either get a buyer to close with you or a seller to list with you.
Yep, well said. Who else with any final questions or comments?
I'd like to say something, and I'm obviously a newer agent, and it's funny, this Zoom call was perfect because I have a situation that honestly, I don't know if it's off market, I'm still very new, or if it's a pocket listing, but regardless, I do not have a listing agreement signed. It's a builder that I was referred to, that's a friend of a friend, and he wants me to market the property or sell it, and he's already talked to me about the commissions. He's most likely not going to be listing it with me. So I've been sending direct emails to a few of the agents within our company, which it's in Beverly Hills Post Office, brand new home, beautiful views. But the seller is asking 8.8 million. So in this group, if anyone knows anyone, it'll be ideal to keep it in our office. The house is complete. So the rest of the house will be complete in 2 weeks, where he's going to probably be listing it. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know.
Can I address that?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we
Yes,
talked
please.
about this morning.
Yeah.
So Michael, whether you're calling it off market or a pocket, it doesn't matter. What matters is, do you or do you not have a signed listing agreement with the seller? And it sounds like you don't.
Correct.
Okay, so all of us as agents, I don't care if you're a new agent or if you've been doing this for 25 years, the only thing that we can control is our time. So we have to ask ourselves, every time a builder or a seller or someone else says to us, hey, Michael, if you bring me a buyer, I'll give you a 10% commission. Or if you bring me a buyer, I'll blah, blah, blah. What we always have to take a step back and ask ourselves, well, wait a minute, if they're saying this to Michael, Is there a chance that they also said it to Brian Pincus and they also said it to Nick and they said it to Mercedes? You then have to ask yourself, is that lemon worth the squeeze? You know, is it worth your time? Because you're trying to be the first one in, and we can't control that. Because even if you are the first one in, you call this builder back and say, hey, Howie Nickel wants to come see it, okay? He says, okay, great. What's to stop him from saying, oh, Austin already called me and said, Howie Nickel wants to come see it. You're not protected.
Yeah.
And if you're not protected,
you're 100% right.
We just all need to, and sometimes it works out. Sometimes it works out, like Mercedes, you gave an example earlier and it worked out, but we all have to remember that. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying,
be aware.
When we don't have a lot of business going on or things are slow, we kind of get excited about someone throwing us a metaphorical bone, but don't run down that rabbit hole and put everything else on hold, because it can be a tremendous time suck. So just be aware of that.
Absolutely.
100%, Howie. Maybe the best thing.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to, I mean, it's a perfect setup for that, because we talked about that this morning. Go ahead, Mercedes.
Yeah, go ahead, Robert. I go after you. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, if you're going to show an $8 million listing, these guys are not loyal no matter what they tell you. And yes, they do tell 20, 50, 70, 100, and they're calling them. They really do. And I've been there. What you want to do, if you're showing it, make sure you send him and get it signed, a one-party agreement. So at least that agent, even if it's another agent, which is risky, or a buyer, you have a commission guaranteed to you. That's the only way with these contractors. They're smooth as front men, but they are nasty and usually beyond most agents to deal with. They are con artists to the ultimate level. If you can handle one of them and be successful, you can do anything.
It's a 1 in a million, really. And then I think Howie hit it right in the head. You have to weigh whether or not that's worth your time, because we happen to have a buyer who is looking exactly for that, so it made complete sense. But if you don't have that, look, Robert is right. They're telling everybody and their mom to look for the property for them. Everybody.
And they're telling
the problem is every day.
They're telling
every day every day I get questions. How do I get commission when there's no agreement?
You don't.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a big takeaway for everyone. So in the interest of time, I hope this was helpful. I knew, and I really appreciate everyone's participation. Again, maybe there isn't complete clarity, but more information helps create more clarity. So process this all. Everyone's in a different position, and the dialogue will continue. And I really, again, encourage collaboration on all different levels, certainly including what we're talking about here, guys, right? None of us is as smart as all of us. And it's not hot air. I really live my life that way. And fortunately, I've got amazing people around me that are often, many of them on this call, that help me become better. And if we all take that perspective, we all rise. So
final words. I have an off-market listing in Encino. Their seller's a real estate agent.
I had one of those in Encino and we closed it recently.
Does Howie know he doesn't live there anymore?
The real estate agent moved out.
All right, guys. Appreciate all of you. Big time. Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank
Have a great
you.
one.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.